Well, hello, and thank you for stopping back here at Ask the Chimney Sweep. I'm Clay Lamb, and today I have Alan Rush on with me today. Alan's quite a trainer, teacher. He's pretty well known in our industry, extremely effective, and he is a stage man, if you know what I mean. He can talk from a stage and get his message across. He really knows how to project his voice and really teach people how to sell. Get ready for a good podcast. And I'll talk to you later about who's coming on with us next week, so stay tuned.
And he reached his hand up there because he couldn't get his brush up. There was something stuck, and so he got up there and he had a helper with him. He's like, "Oh my God, something bit me!" And so he pulled his hand out real quick. And the long story short is it was a squirrel, but the squirrel was dead. So I don't think it bit him. That's right.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Ask the Chimney Sweep, a podcast devoted to helping you enjoy using your own fireplace. My name is Clay Lamb. It really doesn't matter if you're new to having a fireplace. There's always something changing when it comes to heating your home with firewood, gas, or electric. Join me as we gather around this global fireplace to chat about hints, tips, and ideas of how to reduce that heating bill and save some energy. But today, I have none other than Alan Rush. Alan, how you doing, buddy?
Buddy, I am blessed. How are you doing, Clay? Thanks for having me here today, man.
I'm doing good. I can't complain at all. Been busy today. I know that. Just struggling out there with everybody. What's going on? Solving and training problems. Tell the world what you do at Direct Connector, Alan.
Well, the company does quite a bit. My role specifically is really going into small businesses and helping them solve problems, helping them kind of bridge that gap between what we would call marketing and the sales loophole. It doesn't really matter how many customers you bring in the door. If you don't answer the phone right, you don't get the customer into the customer's home, or if you get into the customer's home, you aren't able to make a transaction. The return on the investment for the company is not strong. So,
Alan, I really want to talk to you about something today. I want to talk to our audience out there, which is primarily built of home owners, people that have fireplaces. What I want to hit on, Alan, is what should that homeowner be looking for? Give me some ideas where they should start looking for a contractor and what they should be looking for.
One of the biggest things is just having somebody look at it, right? I mean, we know that the fireplace or wood stove that you're using is one of the most underutilized serviced appliances in your home, and people don't really think of it as an appliance. It's more of, they think of things like their heating and air, or their plumbing systems, or their electrical systems, or washers and dryers and refrigerators. But a fireplace is a live fire in your home. And if there's anything that should be serviced, it should be that. So one is getting it serviced. And then two is just making sure that the person that is going to come out and service that is someone that knows what they're doing, that you can trust, and has all the certifications and credibility to take care of the problems for you.
Okay. Tell our audience where they're going to even begin to look for this guy. You don't go into Yellow Pages anymore. So what's our ladies and gentlemen that's just bought a house? They need to figure out something about a fireplace. Where do they go to look?
Referrals are always a great idea. Certainly heading online. That seems to be the way that everything is going now. Check out, the company has a website. Check out their Better Business Bureau page. Make sure they have a strong rating, and see what their other customers are saying. I mean, we're in a day now where reviews are rampant, and people are not shy about telling if they had a good experience or a bad experience. So if you're considering choosing a company, go check out the reviews and make sure that they're doing good work and they're standing behind it.
Can't tell you how important reviews are to us here at American Chimney in Cincinnati. And I'm shocked at how many people call us and say, let's book it. They've read the reviews. What they've heard is their neighbors, friends, and relatives online, so-called, tell them that we did a good job for them, and they're following that lead. And it really makes a difference. It makes it a much easier, friendlier, sweeter relationship when you go into it. Doesn't mean you don't have to perform with excellence. It just means you have a door open to you. Other ideas I want to say, what should this homeowner look at? Let's list some of the possible ideas that a customer would come for. Let's say odor problems, animal problems, what else?
Either got what we call a known problem. They've recognized that something's not quite right. Either they've got some smells, they're seeing some smoke, maybe water issues are quite a big problem in this industry, and they may see some staining. They may see, if they're just looking from the outside at their chimney, they may see some bricks that are starting to come off. We call that spalling. They may see some mortar that's starting to come out. They may see some cracks at the top of their chimney, what we call the crown. They may actually be seeing white crystallization on their chimney and not even know what that means. In the industry, we call it efflorescence, but all those are signs that water have penetrated the system in some way. And we know that that water is very dangerous and very damaging to a masonry structure.
We always think of water, it can't hurt that much. It's not a problem unless it's water coming into your fireplace and causing problems.
Yeah, well, masonry is a very porous structure, right? So we know that water gets into that, it's going to start to break down the masonry into its core salts and limes. And once you start getting the masonry broke down and you start having to either what we call tuck pointing, which is fixing the joints in the chimney, or actually rebuilding the chimney, that's when you start getting into some dollars. And once it gets below the roof line and starts getting into the home, that's when you start getting into, okay, well, now I've got some remediation concerns. I got water into places that I can't access. So once that water starts to set, I've got some mold and mildew issues. And if people in your home are sensitive to the respiratory issues or have asthma, that's going to certainly make that much worse. And certainly some bigger dollar things once it starts getting into the home.
That's interesting you said that. People think, well, this is 150, 250, 300, whatever amount of money it's for a fireplace. And somebody's got to break that bad news. I always equate it like going to the doctor. You think everything's fine until they whip out the stethoscope and the blood pressure and start doing things. And all of a sudden, wow, am I really living or not? What's going on?
That's right.
So what's going on here? But really, that's what you really have to do. You have to do a diagnosis of what's going on in the chimney. And that just doesn't start at the hearth. It may start there at the door, looking outside and see what the chimney looks like. But there's a whole lot of areas that you have to go through for our homeowner to really understand what's the job of that service contractor while he's at their home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is where you really separate the difference between quality companies and people that are out there doing it at the lowest price possible just to get in the door and try to sell something. If you're working with the right company that has the certifications, they're held to certain standards, and their job is not to sell you something. Their job is to go in there and to make you feel comfortable in using your appliance. And the only way they can do that is through that thorough inspection.
Another thing, I want to make sure you stop there, because a lot of people don't know that codes actually look at a fireplace as being as an appliance.
Absolutely.
They think it's just a fireplace, but that's not really true when it comes to code writing.
That's absolutely true. It is an appliance, and we're held certified sweeps for people that follow the NFPA 211. There's the CSIA. There's a ton of accrediting organizations out there that make sure certain standards are held to, and the quality companies are out there following those standards. And so a technician who does a thorough inspection, he's not only checking the outside, but he's certainly checking everything on the inside. If it's an open fireplace, he's going to hopefully use some sort of video technology, a camera system to actually scan the interior of your system.
Let's walk through that whole idea of what scanning means. Mr. Jones never heard of scanning before.
Yeah, and technology in this industry is constantly getting better. But scanning in our world, in the chimney world, means that we literally have a rod, and there's a camera that's stuck to the end of that rod that's attached to a video screen that both the technician and the homeowner, while they're there, are looking at. And when they're running that camera straight up the flue system, they're able to check the integrity of that system to make sure that everything is venting properly. Basically, the technician is looking to make sure that there's no gaps or cracks, any kind of voids, obstructions, anything that wouldn't allow all the byproducts of combustion to get out of the home safely.
Just so our homeowners understand, you think, what is a gap? There's actually a flue tile. It's a terracotta. It's easy for me to say. Terracotta tile. It's square. It's 2 foot tall. And actually at each joint, every 2 foot, there's a mortar joint, or let's say a non-water soluble joint that's supposed to be there. And it should be there. Now, it could have been deteriorated because of water, or it could have been never installed properly the first time around. And oh my gosh, the only analogy I've ever heard that really works, it's kind of like a straw with holes in it. And it just doesn't work right.
Can't tell you how many hundreds of scans I've been on, and I've seen some crazy stuff to just poor installation to different size flue tiles. We had a 9x9 going into a 9x13 last week. It's like, what are these guys thinking, right?
Wait a minute. We got Mr. and Mrs. Jones. What's that guy talking? What's a 9x9x9? Kind of break that down for Mr. and Mrs. Jones out there.
So just like you were explaining the inside of the system, there's multiple types of lining systems, but one of the most common that we see is the terracotta flue tile. So think of it like a big clay pot inside your chimney, and it's basically usually a big square or rectangle, and they come in all different sizes. So one of the sizes would be like a 9-inch by a 9-inch. Another size might be a 9-inch by a 13-inch. And
now you're talking about square or rectangular.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and so the size of it is going to depend on multiple things. Typically, the bigger the firebox opening or the bigger the appliance is, the more the bigger that flue size is going to be, so things will draft properly.
That flue size square inches should be no less than 10% of the opening of the mouth of the fireplace.
That's right.
Just so everybody knows, the opening of the fireplace or mouth of the fireplace is where you put the wood in. That's called the firebox area. And why don't you kind of break down what the area above it is and what they're looking at so Mr. and Mrs. Jones can picture this in his mind what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So a technician is going to come in. He's going to examine your firebox, which is, as you just said, is where the wood goes. He's going to make sure that everything in there is able to contain high heat events, right? They're going to make sure that there's no cracks, all the mortar's in place, all the fire brick looks really good. Right above the fireplace, which you can't actually see from if you're standing in the room, but right behind your wall where the hearth is, usually kind of right behind your mantle area, is what we call the smoke chamber. And if you think of the smoke chamber as like if you change the oil in your car, like a funnel, an upside down funnel, and basically what that area is literally funneling all the smoke and the byproducts of combustion from the firebox into the flue system. And when you get into a lot of homes, and that's a major area that technicians have to focus on, because depending on how the age of the home or what kind of deterioration may have occurred, we don't see that smooth transfer. And the industry would call that corbelling, but it almost looks like an upside down staircase. And whenever you have that where it's not a smooth transfer, that's a very hot part of the fireplace, and turbulence starts to happen in there because everything is not drafting out properly. And that can cause some of those, what we would call downdraft, which is where you sometimes get some of those smells or smoke back into the home.
This, Alan, let's talk first the firebox area. That can be totally rebuilt with fire clay materials. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the same bricks can be used, or you can actually put in new bricks.
Yep. But
it has to be built with certain specifications. Then you have the damper or the throat area. Yep. Which is the damper area. It's not the flute, people. Not the flute.
We had $1 for every time someone called and said my flute won't open, right?
It happens all the time. So don't feel bad, but it's called the damper. And a lot of the manufacturers call them valve dampers. So they actually mechanically open up. And I think the biggest problem people have with those, Alan, they don't really have an idea what they're looking at because they never get down with a bright light and some cotton gloves and try it a couple of times. That's right. And they're so intimidated. It's going into the abyss. Nobody knows where it's going to be.
That's right. You're putting your hand up. Where's it going? And what am I feeling for? And I'll admit, the first time I did it, started doing this industry, there's so many different kinds, right? There's a ton of different styles of dampers. There's handles, and there's a number of things, and they can be very intimidating. So obviously we want to make sure that the damper is open whenever we're using our fireplace so things can get to the smoke chamber and into the flue system. But yeah, that's certainly something that any qualified technician will be able to show you how to use properly.
I can't tell you how many times I had to get a lady on the ground with the flashlight up there with her hands covered with gloves trying to do this because she wanted to intimidate her husband that she could open the damper.
That's right. She's proud. That's something to be proud of. Honey, I can open the damper.
Yeah, because if you're going to have a fire, it's not getting the matches. It's not getting the wood. It's getting the damper open first.
That's right. Some are easier than others. That's for sure.
Alan, we've got the firebox. We've got the damper. Now we've got that upside down funnel. Let's talk about the interior. What's that supposed to look like?
Depending on the area, what state you're in, what part of the country, there's all kinds of different lining systems. The most common that we see is either is completely unlined, which means that there's just basically the bare brick that you're seeing there, or there is some sort of lining system. The most common is...
We're talking about in the smoke chamber, correct?
So right above the smoke chamber, after all the byproducts leave the smoke chamber, it's going to go into what we call the flue system.
Okay. That inside of that smoke chamber, that upside down funnel, is supposed to be parged smooth inside to allow those gases to rush up there smoothly without disturbance or turbulence to slow it down. So if your serviceman gets there and he gives you a picture of a whole bunch of bricks with holes up in its smoke chamber, you probably have some service work that may need to be done.
That is almost for sure. And what we would call an unparged smoke chamber, or if you see bare brick, is a sign that turbulence can be occurring and that the downdraft is probably going to be present.
One of the interesting things, years ago, when I started in business about 35 years ago, there weren't products out there to really resolve those issues. And I think we all kind of looked at a blind eye, but we all knew there was a huge amount of fires in the smoke chambers. It's the hottest point up in that chimney right there. So it was nice in this last 10 years. There's been a lot of great products brought online that can be hand parged in there or actually spray foamed inside that work extremely well.
Absolutely. So there's multiple solutions depending on the access, depending on how large it is, and really, is it fully corbelled? Meaning, do we see a ton of bricks, or we just got some gaps that we need to fill in? So your technician will make the best solution
Yeah,
based on
it's
that.
horrible when you look up and you see all these bricks with holes in them, thinking, "Oh my gosh, if you only knew how bad this was, ma'am." You wonder why it's smoking back on you and spilling out.
As you said, it is one of the hottest part of the system. That is where, if there are going to be what we call high heat events or fires, that it is a common occurrence for them.
Well, let me tell you, I personally feel I see more 12 by 12 square tiles. So let's take it from the junction of the top of the flue tower. So we've got the firebox area, we've got the damper, we've got the upside down funnel, which is called the smoke chamber. Then we move up into the flue lining system. Let's talk about that flue lining system, the height, the construction material, where it exits out.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, if you're talking about 11 by 11, that you're more than likely talking about terracotta. Again, this is the clay pots that we have. And so basically, as you explained earlier, every 2 feet, these are going to be stacked on top of each other, and there's going to be that mortar joint between them. And so what the whole point of that system is to make sure that all the byproducts, which mainly we're talking about carbon monoxide and creosote here. And a lot of people may not know that creosote is extremely flammable.
Yeah, but that little smoke doesn't hurt me when by the campfire. So how could it really bother me that much in my house?
Think about it this way: if a technician were to scan your flue system, and he's to find that, let's say, there's a crack, or that there's one of the mortar joints may be missing, and creosote is getting outside of the system, you're basically stockpiling fuel at a place that's no longer contained in your fireplace.
You know, I like what you said. Creosote is a fuel, and that really is true. A lot of times we talk about it as this abstract product, but really it's a fuel that's consumed and will burn like crazy. If it's just lightly coated, it can ignite, and there's a couple different stages. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's take this flue all the way up out the top.
Yep. So what the qualified technician is going to be doing, as he's scanning up, he's looking for that. If he does not want to see any gaps, he does not want to see any cracks, because if that's happening and that creosote is getting into those areas that he can no longer clean because his brush is going to stay contained within the tile system, that means that he can no longer clean that. And then that is also an exit point for carbon monoxide. We always recommend, especially if you're having an open fireplace, that all homeowners out there have a carbon monoxide detector. Definitely keep that somewhere around waist to chest level. A lot of people like to make that mistake of thinking it's like a smoke detector where we're going to put it up in the ceiling, but you really want to keep it more around your waist level. So if you are having some sort of escape, that you're going to be able to detect that.
Because the gases are heavier and they lay closer to the ground, don't they?
That's absolutely right.
We've got the gases going up the chimney. Now they're exiting. There's supposed to be a couple inches of the flue tile extending past the top of the chimney top. And let's talk about the crown or splay or crown wash. That's the area where the bricks stop and there's a slab of material at the very top. Let's talk about that a little bit. What needs to be done if there's a lot of damage or little damage?
Once you get past the flue tile, it's going to go through what we call the crown area, which is that big concrete block. And people don't even know really what that's for. But it's one of the most important parts of the system, because that is really the first line of defense to keep water out of your system. And so the point of that crown is to make sure that all the bricks below it are not having water run straight into them and absorb through the top of the chimney. So if you do get up there and they find some cracks or they find some gaps in that crown, there's multiple products that can solve that depending on how much damage it is.
So like hairline cracks, we feel there's enough good products out there that can be covered over the top of that and really make it watertight again.
Absolutely.
You know, let's talk about why those cracks got there. Some of the problems that I've seen were because there was absolutely no expansion joint. Why don't you walk us through what an expansion joint is so our customers out there, our guests, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, understand what it is?
Yeah, so think about, depending on the market you're in, all the freeze thaw that happens. So when water gets into a system, whenever it freezes, what's going to happen? What happens when water freezes, Clay? Yeah, that's the best sound effect of the day, folks. We should just end it right here. No, absolutely, it's going to freeze. So those expansion joints allow for that little bit of movement. But once water gets into the system and there's nowhere else for it to go, it's going to crack, and that's what's going to cause those mortar joints to come out. That's going to cause what we call spalling brick. You're going to see the kind of just the face of it usually at first start to pop off, and it's kind of magical if you're watching it. You'll see it slowly start to work its way down. And one of the things because I work with a lot lot of chimney sweeps, and people that work on the phone, people will call in and say, hey, I've got a missing brick. Can you come out and give me a quote on a missing brick, or can you come replace this brick? And the thing that we want the homeowners to really know is that that missing brick's not your problem, right? That's the symptom. Of course, we can come replace that brick.
That's just a symptom of the problem.
Yeah, because I mean, I can come put another brick in there, but you're going to call them again next year whenever another brick's come out, because we haven't fixed the problem, and that's because they've got water that's intruded into the structure, and they need to take care of it.
Let me take a second here and explain to our guests what that expansion joint is. It's interesting because in most building codes, it does require an expansion joint. Now, that is just when they pour the crown, there's some kind of insulation material wrapped around that flue tile before they finish putting the material in there. What that does, allow a gap in there, so when that thermal expansion happens to that flue tile and expands out, it doesn't crack that crown all over. Just absorb. It's normally pulled out, the insulation is pulled out, then full of caulking material like a silicone. That absorbs that shock and prevents that heavy cracking. If you look at a lot of pictures, you'll see on the flue tiles themselves disseminating cracks going out, and that's from that expansion of the heat. Now, it's interesting to me. I've always laughed at this because I've seen guys sell extended crowns. They drip edge they're also referenced to. But most codes don't reference a drip edge crown, but they all reference an expansion. And it really makes a difference when you see them. Let's talk about some of the materials that are actually used in there. Some of the bad materials. So what happens on Thursday afternoon, it's 90 degrees in August, and the guy doesn't want to go downstairs or down on the mixer and mix up the right materials. What's he putting up there?
Yeah, well, mortar type and all of those things are extremely important. So you've been doing this way longer than I have, and you can talk about all the different type S's and N's and whatever all the letters are. But that's not really my area, I guess.
What we're referencing is there needs to be a concrete base, kind of like what's on your sidewalk. It's a harder material. It's not mortar. When you lay bricks in, that's mortar. That's a softer material. And what happens a lot of times when the contractor was building these homes in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, what they do, they got going so fast and they got paid to get a chimney done. They didn't do the craftsman techniques that were required to do a job with excellence. They didn't put an expansion joint in. They didn't put the right materials. They used the same mortar, or mud as we call it in the industry, yep. And they'll actually dump that right on top, frame it up. It looks all great. Nobody's going to see any problem probably for about 8 or 9 years, and it's going to crack.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about chimney caps. Since we've taken our listeners from the base of the firebox, got them through the damper, got them through the smoke chamber, we got them through the flue tiles, all the way up to the top. We've penetrated out the crown or crown wash or splay, whatever we want to call it. Now it's sticking up. Now you got what? You got a 1 foot by 1 foot hole in your house.
That's right.
What are you going to do with it?
You all have jaded me. I can't drive down a street anymore without looking at the chimney. And I'm like, oh man, they have this problem, or they need to call this person. They need to take care of that. But one of the most common things you can see from the ground is, does it have a chimney cap or not? And so we always recommend that, especially if you put some sort of investment into your system, to put a chimney cap at the top. Typically, those are made out of different materials. A lot of the builder grade homes come with a galvanized type cap, but most of the companies out there today are putting stainless steel because they're going to last forever. They'll typically have a screen or a guard around it. And the two main things that's doing, Clay, is one is it's keeping out any debris, heavy debris, animals. Nobody wants a squirrel or a raccoon or birds getting in there. Birds will get into and build a nest into a chimney quicker than who knows what. But it's also going to keep the direct rain directly out coming from into the system. And so chimney cap is one of the most critical and fairly inexpensive things that you can do to help protect your system.
One of the things I want our homeowners to understand out there, if you're talking to a bricklayer or a mason and he's talking about doing some repair on your chimney, he may reference that area at the top of the chimney instead of a crown. He may refer to it as a cap. An analogy is it's not a cap. What it is, we reference it as a spark arrestor or a chimney cap. It's something that fits around the flue tile. It prevents water and sparks even from coming out, water from going down, animals from getting in, squirrels, raccoons. Let's take our customer down that trail of friendly visitors of raccoons and squirrels and birds.
Yeah, I can tell you that I have been on enough times where I have inspected chimneys, and I have had one live raccoon, which was about the scariest thing. We talked earlier about learning how to work a damper. I got to tell you, there's no worse feeling than sticking your hand up through a damper and something furry's there, Clay. I'll tell you that right right now.
I'll tell you a great story. We have a guy named Jason that works here, and he just told us a story. He was doing a cleaning of a chimney. You were there when he said this. It was great. Tell us a story, man. You're a better storyteller than I am.
I don't know about that, but I think it was a furnace, or it was a hot water heater or something. But he got to where I guess he was reaching through the thimble, which is basically a hole in the wall that where the venting starts, and he reached his hand up there because he couldn't get his brush up. There was something stuck, and so he got up there and he had a helper with him. He's like, "Oh my God, something bit me!" And so he pulled his hand out real quick. And the long story short is it was a squirrel, but the squirrel was dead. So I don't think it bit him. I think it just
Mine never mattered.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know what? He's never going to live that down.
Oh, for
we
sure.
will never let him live that down.
Now, one interesting thing that a lot of people may not know about, depending on the area you're in, especially if you're more on the East Coast, is we have this phenomenon called there's a certain type of bird called the chimney swift, and the chimney swift is a migratory bird that comes down from Canada, and it is like clockwork.
Wait a minute. Did you say migrator?
Migratory?
Migratory?
Migratory, that's the word we're looking for.
That works.
The chimney swift is migratory. That is way better. Thank you, Clay.
Hey, I need all the help I can get. I give it when I can.
Yeah, migratory. That's what we say in the South.
All right, that's good. That's a good out.
That's right. So, but yeah, this is actually a protected bird. It's you actually, if you don't have a chimney cap and it gets into your system, it's one of the only birds that can actually fly vertical. So once it gets in there, it pretty much builds a home and it stays there. And so if you hear these chirping and things like that going on, if you call out a reputable chimney sweep, they're going to know that bird is protected by law. And
you better not touch the bird, the egg, the feather, the nest.
Can't touch any of it. All you can do is wait until they have evacuated your home, have the chimney sweep come back, do a thorough cleaning and inspection for you, and then make sure you get a cap on there so that bird doesn't come back.
I think the U.S. Department of Wildlife will honor certain situations that there are heavy problems with bugs. And I've been in there where it looks pretty nasty when you open it up and you see children around there and it gets real serious.
Yeah.
But they're really federally protected. It's something you don't mess with. I remember years ago, I used to take them out all the time. But then we start to realize, man, we're doing something really wrong. And it's not that it's an endangered species. It was actually thrown into a migratory batch of birds. It's never been endangered from what I understand. They fly from South America, and they really nest large amounts of volumes of groups of them into one chimney. But it seems like when they hit that Mason-Dixon line, they kind of spread out to have their chicks.
Yeah, it is fascinating phenomenon. I just learned about them a couple of years ago, and we see them all across pretty much coming right down exactly right. The Mason-Dixon line is kind of that area.
You kind of think they look like bats, but they're not bats. They're ornery little suckers, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and they like to chirp.
Hey, Alan, it's been a blast with you here today. Thanks for stopping by here to ask the Chimney Sweep. We're going to have you on again. I'm going to pull about 3 of these together. Are you game for that, buddy?
You bet, man. Anytime. Glad to help, and I appreciate you having me.
Well, my friends, thanks for stopping by here to ask the Chimney Sweep. And if you have a question of anything with doing the fireplace or wood stove or heating system, we sure like to help you there. And you probably have more questions than we have answers, so we'll just get in other resources that can bring us to excellence of solving your problems. Thanks for stopping by. And as I always say, be civil with all mankind. Love and protect your family. Honor and serve your God. Now go enjoy your fireplace.
Good job, man. Migratory.
That's a fun way to do it. Alan Rush has a lot of wisdom. Thanks, Alan, for sharing it with us. And like I said, next week we got a special guest. We got Chris Pryor on. Most people know Chris because of the Pryor Fire that he designed and built, along with John Meredith, and pulled that together and done a lot for our industry. So join us next week for Chris Pryor and some words of wisdom. Do me a favor, if you don't mind, if you'd please go ahead and like and subscribe to our channel. It helps us a lot with the algorithm, and we need all the help we can get to rock and roll to bring us even more and more subscribers. Thanks so much. Clay Lamb here.